No, next, as I said earlier on, Michael, I don't think was in the room, but it's Michael Dunne. Maybe quite a few familiar with Michael. He's been around Dell for a while, and Dave Craddock in the corner there. They're about to take the next session, which should be quite interesting.
Good one. Thanks, Andrew. So, Mike Dunne, I used to look after K-12 in Victoria, but in the last year I've transitioned to a new role in Dell. I'm looking after everything that's not FAT client, so VDI, application virtualization, all this kind of cool stuff. So we're here to talk a little bit about how these technologies might fit in a school space, and I noticed quite a few hands up about BYO, so I think it's probably some interesting technology if that's what you're thinking about. This is Dave. Dave looks after our vWorkspace application, which is a desktop virtualization toolset. So I'll just give you a little bit of background about why we're here, what we're thinking, and feel free to jump in, ask questions. Dave will answer them because he's a smart guy, and I'll just keep talking.
I just make him look good.
That's it.
Well, I try. Yeah.
I'll do the dance. So obviously, one-to-one, massive subject in schools. We've seen a lot of development in curriculum around using technology in the school, in the classroom, and I guess moving forward, there's that funding gap now where we're seeing potentially no more federal funding for one-to-one. How are we going to support it? And that's a question a lot of schools are struggling with at the moment. So that's really what we're here to talk about, what those different procurement models look like and how they can be managed technically. Okay, so it's a technical audience here today. Anyone not technical?
It's all right.
Yes.
We won't ask you to. We won't ask you to leave the room.
We won't hold it against you. Don't worry. I'll aim all the questions over here. Is that right? It's all right. I'm not technical either. Okay, so I guess just framing this up a little bit further, from a funding perspective, the way you could look at that is we could keep going with a school-funded device. That's probably not an option, so I'm going to cross that one out. That's the school-owned. So most schools are looking at either a parent contribution on a device that would remain school property, or a device which is just a straight BYO. Right? And this presentation will split off into two streams to address both sides of that question. So the two sides, as I said, we're really talking about from a technology perspective how we can support it. On the parent contribution school-owned side, that typically wraps around your sort of traditional IT management of a fleet, and typically means a single device per procurement cycle, a school-owned SOE that's deployed to that device, and some sort of device management strategy to make sure that you're not trying to herd cats and bring all those devices back in and re-image them and that kind of stuff. We need to be able to remote manage those devices. So from a Dell perspective, that's our KACE product, and Mark's going to talk a little bit about KACE in a minute. On the BYO side, which is where Dave and I fit in, we're really, I guess, jumping ahead a little bit. We're saying this is desktop virtualization is a good fit here for BYO, and that tiers into our vWorkspace product. So just to give you a bit better idea, so I'm from the Cloud Client Computing Division. That's very exciting. Feel free to ask questions too. I think I said that. If anyone's got anything, jump in. Don't worry about it. So from a trend perspective, across the market, not just in education, we're seeing a big push towards, you would have heard, consumerisation of IT. People want to implement BYO strategies. Normally in a corporate sense, they're not so much talking about the primary corporate device, although some people are looking at that. Normally in a corporate sense, it's really revolving around ancillary or devices that augment my workplace, like my phone or a tablet. I want to be able to bring my own device into work and get access to some of these resources at work, my information and applications, and just be able to work in a way that suits me, as opposed to I've got a fixed workplace as in a desktop. How can I use these new technologies? Don't worry about the graphs, that's kind of what it's saying. There's a big uptake in interest and in implementation of technologies around this. So just really to give you a baseline idea of where we're coming from, what this is all about. You remember traditionally best practice for server management was to have one physical server per OS instance and then one application running on that server, trying to keep segregation of roles in servers. Obviously it didn't really happen. We had multiple roles on servers. It usually turned into a management mess. Then along came virtualization. We were able to add a hypervisor and separate those virtual machines now, run them on a limited set of hardware. So I'm pretty sure every one of you has probably done this already. Likewise, we can do that in a client environment. We can take that OS that's sitting on that endpoint right now, that's got its own applications. We can insert a hypervisor in the middle, and we can run those workloads on a server. So instead of that OS and application stack sitting out on that device, we can execute it on a server. That has a few implications for the way you manage things, right? So what do your customers, the students and teachers, etc. see? Well, they can view that instance of Windows from any device now. Right, so that's really how we're talking about supporting BYO, is being able to take that instance, virtualize it, and then display it from any device. There's a number of impacts which I'll drill in a bit deeper. Jump in if you've got any questions.
Please stand by for the following announcements.
There's a question.
Well,
Statement, not a question.
E Block staff room at lunchtime. Daniel Green-Warner, Rhiannon Glossop, Jodie Reeve,
We don't
and
need to hear
Anthony
that.
McGregor.
So what does this mean? Obviously different industries have got different,
Georgia
the
Beatty,
nature of VDI yields a few interesting
Josh Scriver,
implications for different industries, and I'll just give you a quick idea what this might be. So universities are there, like schools, looking to expand their
Thank you.
capacity to serve new customers, and one of the things that's big in universities is distance ed. We're trying to draw students into Australia. Maybe we can also extend our offerings out offshore as well. So being able to support people off campus is a big impact for universities. Security is a big issue in some industries, so places like defence and police, etc. Being able to have that whole application and data stack inside a data centre behind one of the really cool firewalls that Ravi is talking about is really important to those sort of customers, right? Because it's not executing on that endpoint. If someone steals that policeman's laptop, doesn't matter, there's nothing on it, right? It only matters is what's executing on that server. Places like call centres probably touch a little bit on what you do in a school. When we had the labs, they revolve staff constantly. No one has their own fixed seat. They might use the call centre for different purposes between shifts. So being able to change images between shifts is a big plus in a call centre. Places, just general corporate. Virtualising, you would have seen this in a server environment, lets you scale up and down really easily. Same in a corporate environment for desktops. We're acquiring a new company, we need to onboard new staff quickly. How can we execute? Let's use virtualisation in that way. We can deploy an SOE quickly to non-standard devices. You beauty, right? And lastly, I guess health. Doctors roam between wards and they tap on and tap off between machines, so they need that session portability. Because it's running on a server, it doesn't matter what device you're on, right? So that session portability is important in health. What does it mean in school? Okay, from an IT perspective, you don't need to image machines anymore. So the image is sitting on a server. It's inherently easier to manage the environment because the environment is on that machine that's right next to you, right? So things like, a teacher comes in, I've got a new application, I really need you to put this in for my next class, it's in 10 minutes, or maybe not 10 minutes, maybe it's tomorrow.
Stephen and Caitlin.
10 minutes is typical, right? In fact, why isn't it on there already? Well, that sort of thing, that's the kind of stuff you can, you can take your standard VM, you can add in the new application and publish it really quickly because it's instantly available. Those people just log in and see that VM, right? So those sort of things, it gives you that flexibility to respond quickly. If you've got an issue in your image, it's very easy to take it offline, remediate it and publish it again. You know, you don't have to, like I said, herd all the cats back, get all those laptops back and touch them. It's all remote. Device drivers, that kind of thing, doesn't matter. Image is executing on a server. Any device can see that image from you know, an iPad, an Android, any sort of laptop, a MacBook, whatever. Anyone can use that image. Obviously, on some devices, Windows won't appear as good as on some other devices, but you know, at least you can see and touch and use it. The other nice thing is, from a performance perspective, because everything's executing on that server, everybody, irrespective of device, is getting the same level of performance for their session. Right? Let's keep going. In the classroom, you know, teachers, you know, probably not necessarily the most tech savvy people. Not that they're not tech savvy, I guess it's probably the wrong way to present it. Teachers have got a very limited time frame in which to execute their teaching, right? They've got a lot of things on their plate. They can't afford to have variation in the classroom. If things don't work the way they expect it when they get in the class, they just can't use technology. They'll move on, they'll use something else, right? Back to the whiteboard. So from an IT perspective, it's really important that you make systems easy to use for teachers, because you're there to support their teaching. With VDI, that virtual session is the same on every device, irrespective of the device. So no matter what the kids are doing, the teacher can say, click here, 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 and here, and X, Y, Z will happen, and it will happen the same on every machine. So you get that consistency in the classroom that teachers can teach to, right? We talked about adding applications at short notice. Maybe you don't publish that fact, but you know, you are a little bit more flexible there. This is probably a touchy subject to business managers. You know, how do you procure and own devices? You can use VDI even on your own devices. I'm not saying that you have to necessarily go BYO, but it is a good opportunity, I think, to open up that door and say to parents, you know, maybe here's a recommended device that we think would suit your child in the classroom. But if you happen to, you know, if Dave's mum bought him a laptop at Christmas and, you know, it's the latest Alienware, and Dave's really happy with it,
No way.
you know, and I'm not that keen on buying him another one, you avoid that. You know, that issue's not really an issue anymore. Dave can bring his Alienware and he can open that VM and away he goes, right? So it's a little bit of a softer touch with parents in terms of forcing them to buy a device. Is that a hot, you know, hot topic with your parents? You get some pushback on, we don't want to be told what to buy? Yeah. Actually, another thing just on that cost perspective, you've probably heard of Moore's Law, right? The idea that technology doubles in performance every 18 months and, you know, value drops or whatever. Interestingly, that doesn't seem to, I mean, the performance doubles on your laptops, right? But interestingly, the cost doesn't seem to halve every 2 years, does it? We've kind of been at that, you know, $500 low end, $800 middle, $1,000 high end price point for a number of years now. We haven't really seen any change. The machines are just getting better. If you know, if Dave broke in and stole my laptop overnight and put my last year's
I feel victimised.
insides in here, I'm a power user. I'm telling you, I wouldn't notice. You know,
He's not a power user.
I'm not a power user. I've just worked out I can watch videos on this. It's pretty cool. So you know, my point is on the endpoint, that performance improvement. This Colin from Intel here probably doesn't want to hear this. That endpoint improvement is not that important to the end user's experience of that device. But on the server side, where this virtualization operating system is running, think about it. You know, that those servers, what last generation servers to this generation was about 3 times performance improvement. Next generation probably had the same performance improvement. So that virtualization backend, every generation decreases in cost because you're supporting the same amount of users, right? Each, you know, schools aren't massively growing. You might have, say, 1,000 students in the school. If your back-end cost, I don't know, $60,000 in server hardware this time around, next time you refresh those servers in 3 to 4 years, it's probably 30 grand. You know, so it's a decreasing cost load for virtualization. So, as you probably saw from Ravi, you know, Dell's evolving quite rapidly. Well, it seems rapid, but it's been going on for probably 6 or 8 years. Michael Dell left the company, realised that you know, it wasn't being run that well, decided to come back in, and he came back with fresh eyes. So Dell really was, point of excellence was in supply chain, so building laptops and servers and desktops really efficiently and delivering them to market and supporting them. That was the point of excellence of Dell. That really helped Dell get to #1 spot in IT for, you know, for the last 20 years. What's changed is when Michael Dell came back in, he realised that space is commoditising rapidly, and that there's really not a high level of value in those pieces of tin anymore. So it's really more about the systems around IT and the services around IT that provide value. And so we've been on this transition journey, and that's meant acquiring a whole lot of technology. So if you didn't know, Dell's #3 spot for networking now. We've got Sonic Wall, which is you know, in the top list of firewalls, definitely you know, above and beyond what you would probably normally think of from firewall vendors. We've got a number of storage companies have been acquired, and we've got a huge amount of IP around SAN storage. We've acquired Quest, which is a huge software company. It's got famous for probably not just having one product, but having a huge swathe of tools. So if you're a yes can, oh really? No, not 2 minutes. Anyway, look, we've got a huge amount of technology there, and one of those acquisitions was Wise. Wise is a thin client company, and they came with a bunch of different software set tools that help VDI. Along with Quest came vWorkspace. So there's a huge amount of technology there, right? It's not just the tin that we're talking about. So what have we done in VDI? We've got a portfolio of products there, and it's really our DVS group has aimed to build virtualization solutions that give you the lowest cost per virtual machine. So we've done over 100,000 hours of testing on all the different types of VDI technologies. And we've built reference architectures to help you get that lowest cost with a known performance outcome. So I've been given the time, so I'm going to pass to Dave, because he's going to talk a little bit more about vWorkspace. There you go, Dave.
Thanks. So Cam, how much time is there really? Okay. Desktop virtualization. So you've heard a lot about it today. If you know that you can do it for less than the cost of a desktop replacement, is anybody interested? Okay, there's a couple of big hands up. Well, actually, someone put both hands up. Take his name, Kyle. So the interesting thing today is you can do desktops as a service, or desktop, or virtual desktop, however you want to call it. You can do it for less than the desktop replacement. Back in the day, having a look at, and dare I say, even the wireless thin clients, etc., things like that, 3 years ago, with the advent of an iPad, people started to realise that you don't necessarily need to include some sort of client device to make it all work. You can just use whatever comes. The kicking off point for the BYOD, the whole scenario around BYOD, started with the iPad. In fact, up to date, it's been the most disruptive technology that's been released on us today. I'd almost sort of caveat that with it's the most disruptive hardware so far, okay? Sorry?
It's a virus.
Actually, my wife tends to refer to Apple as a bit of a, she doesn't say it's a virus, but she refers to it as proprietary technology. She knows enough to know that, unfortunately, she also wants everything in the house to be white, to be minimalist. So I've got a bit of a quandary at home, but that's another story. Look, the whole thing is BYOD is capable of being delivered today. Now, I've got two pieces of technology I can show you. One is traditional VDI with networking connectivity, which is basically the same as, it's an extension of terminal services or VDI. It's your choice. It can be competitive to Citrix, XenApp, XenDesktop. Much more affordable, more in keeping with the education price point. Let me just put it to you this way. We would not be beaten on price. If you want to deploy it, we can do that. And in fact, Kyle, did we mention something before about a POC?
Yeah.
Anyone who wants to come up and have a chat to Kyle and is fair dinkum about it, sorry, that's a Rudd analogy, but if you just go and have a chat to Kyle, we'll be looking at making sure that the first person who comes up can get a free POC, okay, of VDI, all right? The other one I'm going to just touch on briefly is an offline VDI model. Now this is something that's not been done well today, except in this particular circumstance. The reason why I bring this up today and just give you a choice of which one you'd like to see more, because A, I got time constraints, but B, I'm mindful of the fact that here in Geelong, would it be fair to say that most of you have come from the outlying areas? Or at least you have students in outlying areas. Is that a fair call? Yeah. So, hands up if all of your students have ADSL 2. There we go, that answers that question, all right? So, we'll look at an offline VDI model because that is probably going to be more appropriate for your students, or in effect, as Mike refers to it, as your customers, because that's really what they are. Now, this is just very briefly how an online this is how an online VDI system looks. It's very simple, very straightforward, traditional sort of Microsoft stack, build on top of that, and away we go from there. Now, we can do that, that's absolutely fine, but you need a network connectivity, okay? We can cope with latency, we can cope with a number of other bits and pieces, we can give you great flash redirection usability, all right? But I don't want to talk to you about that because I don't think that's quite as important as making sure you understand how this system works, okay? Now I feel like I'm in a cabaret, right? Anyway, so the whole point about this is it's offline desktop virtualization. You take a regular PC, you build up a virtual machine, build it in its bubble, if you will. I mean, for that, is anyone, I take it everyone's familiar with virtualization, right? Just a quick, look, there's enough nods, that's fine, okay. So you build your virtual machine, you publish up to that management server, okay? Once it's published to the management server, you can then deploy it based around 80 to 90 policies, which will help contain, display it, make sure that for the user it's either enforced to full screen or they have usability to the underlying host components, all right? You can then deploy it across your network to a wide variety of devices. Now this is again something that no other vendor can give you or promise you, okay? You can deploy it onto pre-existing operating systems sitting on laptops. You can also deploy it directly onto bare hardware. Now, the way this maps out in your organisations, computer labs. By the way, does anyone still have computer labs? Quite a vast majority. Are you still going to have computer labs in 2 years? Okay, that's a bit equal. That's a bit yes and no, okay? So in the meantime, if you've got computer labs, you can run something directly onto hardware. You're running a client virtualizer piece. This is effectively like an ESX, but for a PC. Does that make sense? Okay? You can then run your master gold template and run it simply on here. Okay? Now you've got a choice. You can run more than one. We've actually got an instance where one school actually shares the computer lab with the TAFE. So you can run 2 different instances. One is tied to the college Active Directory and the other one is tied to the TAFE Active Directory. When the users come in to start, they simply shut down, well, suspend one and start the other, okay? Very simple, very straightforward. If you wanted to have different instances focused on either engineering or video editing, etc., you can have multiple images and have them run up as you need to. Now, in the other instance, when we talk about a client hypervisor sitting off on an operating system, the nice part about this is we support Macs, we support XP, we support Win 7. We also support Win 8 as a host. In fact, Win 8 as a guest in this environment, inside this whole environment, is out in the next release, probably in about 6 to 8 weeks. Okay? So now you have a complete open platform, whether you're still on XP, Win 7, Win 8, and being able to drop your master image on top. Now, and I think, Paul, we discussed this briefly before, if you're looking at a class area of, say, years 9, 10, 11 and 12, trying to find a hardware that will last 4 years is quite difficult. So think about trying to just get hardware that will only fit the first 3 years. At year 12, you then support a true BYOD platform, where the students turn up with whatever device they want, and you simply allow them to download and run your master image on their hardware. Okay? The real important piece to take away from this, local execution. Okay? This is not being run in a server room. It's not being run on hardware that you have to scale up to meet the needs of the students. This is an architecture model for VDI that deploys your master image, which is your intellectual property, and puts it directly onto the client device. That's the real key here. Okay? This is so scalable that one virtual management server of 2 virtual CPU and 4 gig of RAM can support up to 2,500 devices. Does that make sense? I heard a few oohs. Okay? Alright? But this is really, really useful for education. Every customer we've spoken to so far who's installed this has bought it. Okay? We've got some great usage cases. Marist College up in Ashgrove in Queensland. We've also got Varsity College. 3,500 laptops. They were desperately looking for something to change their whole model. And in fact, look, I know that they're a HP shop, but look, regardless, from their point of view, they did not have an answer for BYOD. Okay? Sorry, go ahead. We did say questions. Come on, bring them on.
Wouldn't there be hardware requirements doing it that way? So it's the actual...
Absolutely. Good question. Good point. Okay? I'll just jump straight into the next piece. The nice part is there are a couple of competing solutions out there that are not wide and open. You need a hardware compatibility list, okay? In fact, this does not have a hardware compatibility list. The simple requirements are a minimum of 4 gig of RAM and an x64 capable CPU. Now that brings into question one caveat on this that you do need to take away from this. This solution is not suitable for the current tablets, okay? It won't work. Because this is all about taking that virtual device, that virtual machine, and downloading it onto the client. Okay? So it won't run on ARM processors, it won't run on Cyrix, it won't run on Marvel, ARM stuff, etc. Having said that, I believe Dell have a 11-inch.
So all Dell's tablets are x86.
Yep, but they don't have one with 4 gig of RAM just yet. Okay? But the next release, I think in October, will actually have one. Is it ideal? Not necessarily. Will it support touch? Yes. Okay. This model will support touch. I've already been using it and testing it in some old Dell XT3s. Okay. So touch does pass straight through. It's not a problem whatsoever. Okay. Sure.
How does licensing fit in with it? Microsoft licensing.
Microsoft licensing. That's an interesting one, but again, it comes back to that, and I'm not ducking the question, but it's hard for us to give you an authoritative question, an authoritative answer, I should say, when I'm having to do, well, I deal with APJ, but look, even in ANZ, each state has their own different mechanism with Microsoft, and it does depend on your agreements with Microsoft. So we have to.
You need to take that back to Insight and ask them
Yeah,
about it. So
absolutely.
I've talked to the department about it, and they won't share the contents of their Microsoft agreement with third parties, so they won't tell us, but
They don't even tell us.
Yeah, I don't think-
Well, that's going to make it extremely hard for us. But
There's a bloke called Wayne that runs it.
That's right, yeah.
okay,
With
Yeah,
the
it's not very responsive.
okay.
Okay, you could always go to the department
Sorry, go ahead.
contract manager.
We're actually in negotiation with Insight, who are in negotiation with Microsoft, and we can't get a straight answer. And they just keep saying wait, just
Okay.
wait.
What I have been told, I don't know about this client-hosted part, but from the more server-side VM front is, what I have been told is that if you connect with a machine that's capable of running Windows, you're okay. You can't connect to something like an iPad. Well, you can physically do it. You just need to pay an extra license to Microsoft for it. But again, I can't 100% say even that's true. You need to qualify it. Yeah.
Does that help? I'm really sorry, but the Microsoft side of the things, that is, by the time we deal with state and private and independence and each state, etc.
With there'd obviously be hard drive requirements.
Yes.
Hard drive requirements. So 64 gig SSDs are going to be a no-go.
60.
Because
Well,
I'm assuming it's pulling down pretty much a whole VHD.
it is, but then this brings up a very interesting question. How big is your master template? I mean, we've seen schools of up to 70 gig.
Just 20, 30 gigs installed.
Yep.
So
You know, we have had environments up to 70 gig, and it still copes. And in fact, Morris Ashgrove, I think, is about 50. Quite fine. I mean, the main. I mean, take it on board that this is the specific usage case that we started with Ashgrove. They have a boarding school of 300 students. Those 300 students, they could not predict what they bring, and they couldn't imprint on them what they could or couldn't bring. So they had to deal with it somehow. So for them, this was absolutely ideal. I know, 2 minutes, all right. I'll try and, well, hey, look, if they keep asking questions, all right? But for that particular instance, MacBook Air, student turns up, over the wireless, within 20 minutes, that student has pulled down and installed the master image on top of his MacBook Air. Zero touch from IT admin, okay? The nice thing is it has revoke and kill at the end of it. So at a year 12 level, when the students leave, you can just tell them at December 16th or whatever time it is, don't worry, because as of the 23rd of December, we're going to wipe and kill the master piece that sits on your device. After that, it reverts back to the XP that I got from Harvey Norman, etc., whatever they had to start with, okay? But the real key to take away from this is it's down to the client device. You don't have to scale up in the server room. I'm sorry, you know, from our point of view, that we're not having to sell you servers. That would be nice. But minimum bandwidth is just to download and install. Then it's just Delta updates down to the device. So you can have students actually take the laptops home and still run with it in a rural area with no connections. Okay? So look, I've tried to keep it short and sharp and sort of on point. If anyone's got any further questions or would like to certainly avail ourselves of having a proof of concept for a VDI, please have a chat to myself or Kyle. Thanks very much.
So you might recall back at the start of the presentation we talked about the two ownership models. So one of them being BYO, the other being school owned or parent co-funded. So Mark is from the KACE team. He's going to talk about system management. We have a time. Lunch. Right, Mark will be super quick, and if you want to hang around a little bit into lunch, I'm sure he'll won't mind. Yeah, sure.
Just wanted to let you know that lunch has arrived, and thank you to Michael and also to David. The Dell team will all be outside to the right as you go out the door. You'll see them there. If you've got some questions, just approach them and ask them. They'll be more than happy to answer. Lunch has arrived, as Michael was saying, as have the first lot of coffees. Important things that I just need to let you know is those of you that put down for dietary requirements in particular, they'll be there. After lunch will be Stephen and myself, and then Liz Powell's going to be talking on a fairly relevant subject to do with particularly the Department of Ed, is the first Windows 8 SOE's being put out now. So it's doing Windows 8 and tablet use, which will be an interesting one. All of the afternoon sessions will be in this room, and we'll get some windows open and air out the room a little bit so you're not so hot and sleepy. So thanks again to the Dell guys, and yes, clap for these guys, and don't forget the other vendors that are out there in the foyer area as well. So yep, if you want a break for lunch, it's all out there now.
Alright, that was it. If you guys want to just stay for 5 minutes, I'll only take 5 minutes just before you guys break for lunch. I'm not going to go through the whole presentation. Just want to have a quick discussion on Dell KACE and systems management. Just a very, very brief one. Just hands up in the room who currently uses a systems management product to manage their fat client end user devices, something like SCCM, Altiris, yep. Who thinks it's a fantastic product that's easy to use, it does everything that you need to do, and it's, quite robust. Okay, a couple of hands up from there. Hey,
No, it's all right. No.
that what you say, Dave?
Just interjecting. Get out of town.
Okay, so Dell has a systems managed product called Dell KACE. A lot of the conjecture with SCCM, and I'll be very frank, is it's a big beast, okay? So it needs a lot of resources to get up and running. It needs a lot of prerequisites to get up and running. Your servers, your Windows, your SQL database, storage, etc. Okay? The upgrade from 2007, no?
No, we're fine, thank you very much. We're running on a 4 gig machine.
Okay. That's good. But look, some companies don't have the skills necessary to actually manage that product, okay? What we're talking about here is a systems management appliance device that slips into your actual organisation, much like a firewall does, and gets up and running in as little as a day, okay? 2 days to the max. But the discussion I wanted to have was complexities about systems management. So very, very briefly, you guys all run EduStar, okay? So 25, 30 gig image. Hands up in the room who runs all Windows. Hands up who's got a hybrid or thinks they're going to get a hybrid of Mac OS X environment in their fleet. Okay, good. Who runs Linux? Any Linux people out there? No, not yet? So, yes, SCCM, fantastic product. Once you get it up and running, it does everything that you need to get done from a systems management product, but it only is a Windows shop. Okay? 2012?
2012, so Stack 1, right, works on Macs.
Who's upgraded to SCCM 2012?
Does mobile management too, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yep.
Within Tune.
Within Tune. Okay. So, KACE does your Mac OS X, your Windows, your Linux environment. It does your BYOD environment, much like the Pocket Cloud that Wise has, and vWorkspace from a K3000 appliance as well. And it does also your imaging and deployment. Now the big differentiating factor about, I guess, a Dell KACE perspective is, and which is different to SCCM, inventory from a software application perspective is done through a Dell Cloud software asset catalog. So basically when you do the inventory, and this is one of our differentiators that we have from an SCCM product or an Altiris product, is that when we do an inventory of software, we do an inventory based on that catalog. This catalog is actually hooked up to our third-party vendors, and they actually give us the true indication of what applications are actually installed in your environment, not just executables, not just drivers, but actually gives you a list of all those actual real-type applications. So when you do inventory and reporting, it's a lot more accurate. Thirdly, from a device perspective, when you do create your EduStar image, or when you need to modify your EduStar image, typically you have to add in the different vendors that you support, your Dells, your HPs, your Lenovo's, etc. You have to add those drivers if you want to add new hardware to your devices.
Could
okay?
students please note there are large strawberry Big M's for sale in the canteen now.
Big M's.
$2.50. Large strawberry Big M's.
So with that, the Dell KACE appliance actually does all the automation for you from actually deploying those actual drivers. And I will just show you one slide, which, not one slide, one. So here's the driver feed section, one of the actual components of the actual, I can't see that. So these are all the models that Dell have in their actual fleet to manage. Once you tick any one of these device models and hardware, that will automatically connect again up to the Dell.com site, download the drivers into your driver cache, and when you actually go and create an image, it will automatically deploy those drivers only. So you're not actually expanding your actual EduStar image or your SOE image. All the background, I guess, work is being completed for you from the Dell KACE perspective. Okay? Don't want to keep you guys from... Yeah, question?
What if they're not a Dell device?
If they're not a Dell... Yeah, if they're not a Dell device, you download it and install it, or you drop those raw files, those cap files, straight into the driver cache. So exactly the same, I guess, activity. When you go and build that third-party machine, it'll just pull the drivers directly from the cache. Again, you don't have to open up that image just to add those drivers in.
We don't have to do that either.
No, we don't. Yes.
We actually inject it when I first download, it actually detects what computer it is based on the card and all that sort of thing. And if it's a Lenovo, it puts on the Lenovo, and if it's an Acer, it puts on the Acer.
Yep.
With the drivers all built in afterwards. So
Afterwards, yeah. This is so you strip down your image. You don't even have to build in any drivers into your raw image. Keep it stock standard from EduStar. No driver interjection at all. All the drivers are done in the back end. So if you need to change your hardware device, you just change the back end. But look, I just want to take 5 minutes. We'll be out there if you guys want to have a quick chat. Yeah, but enjoy your lunch.
Thanks, Mark.